answer to Mark, said Gandalf. I put it there myself, for very good reason. You asked me to find the 14th man of your expedition, and I choose Mr. Baggins. Just let anyone say I chose the wrong man or the wrong house, and you can stop at 13 and have all the bad luck you want, and just go back to digging coal. Gandalf scowled so angrily at Glóin that the dwarf huddled back in his chair, and when Bilbo tried to open his mouth to ask a question, he turned and frowned at him and stuck out his bushy eyebrows till Bilbo shut his mouth tight like a snap. That's right, said Gandalf. Let's have no more argument. I have chosen Mr. Baggins, and that ought to be enough for all of you. If I say he is a burglar he is, or will be when the time comes. There is a lot more in him than you guess, and a deal more than he has any idea of himself. You may possibly all live to thank me yet. Now, Bilbo, my boy, fetch the lamp. Let's have a little bit of light on this. On the table, in the light of a big lamp with a red shade, he spread a piece of parchment, rather like a map. This was made by Thror, your grandfather, Thorin, he said in answer to the dwarf's excited questions. It's a plan of the mountain. I don't see how this helps us much, said Thorin disappointedly after a glance. I remember the mountain well enough, and the lands about it, and I know where Mirkwood is, and the Withered Heath, and I know where the dragon's bred. There's a dragon marked in red on this mountain, said Balin. But it'd be easy enough to find him without that if we arrive there. There is one point you haven't noticed, said the wizard, and that is the secret entrance. You see that rune on the west side, the hand pointing to it from the other runes? That marks a hidden passage in the lower halls. No. It may have been secret once, but how do we know that it's secret any longer? Old Smaug has lived there long enough to find out anything there is to know about those caves. He may, but he can't have used it for years, not years and years. Why? Because it's too small. That's one thing. 5 feet high the door is, and 3 may walk abreast, say the runes. But Smaug could not creep into a hole that size, not even when he was a young dragon. Certainly not after devouring so many dwarves and men of Dale. It seems a great big hole to me, squeaked Bilbo, who had no experience of dragons and only of hobbit holes. He was getting excited and interested again, so that he forgot to keep his mouth shut. He loved maps, and in his hall hung a large one of the country road with all his favourite walks marked on it in red. How could, if you don't mind me asking, how could a large door be kept secret from everybody outside, apart from the dragon, that is? He asked. He was only a little hobbit, you must remember. In lots of ways, said Gandalf. But in what way this one has been hidden, we don't know without going to see. From what it says on the map, I should guess there's a closed door which is made to look exactly like the side of the mountain. That is the usual dwarf's method. I think that's right, isn't it? Quite right, said Thorin. Also, went on Gandalf, I forgot to mention that with the map went a key, a small and curious key, and here it is, he said, and handed it to Thorin. A key which had a long barrel and intricate wards made of silver at the end of a chain. Keep it safe. Indeed I will, said Thorin, and he fastened it upon the chain that hung around his neck now under the jacket. Now, things begin to look a lot more hopeful. This news alters them much more for the better. So far we had no idea what to do. We thought of going east as quiet and carefully as we could as far as the Long Lake. After that the trouble would begin. A long time before that, if I know anything about the road east, interrupted Gandalf. We might go from there up along the river running, went on Thorin, taking no notice, and so to the ruins of Dale, the old town in the valley there under the shadow of the mountain. But we none of us like the idea of the front gate. The river runs right out through it to the great cliff to the south of the mountain, and out of it comes more than just a river. It comes a dragon too. Far too often, unless he's changed his habits. Well, that would be no good, said the wizard. Not without a mighty warrior, or even a hero. I tried to find one, but warriors and heroes are busy fighting one another in distant lands, and in this neighbourhood, heroes are quite scarce, or simply not to be found. Swords in these parts are mostly blunt, and axes used for trees, and shields as cradles or dish covers, and dragons are comfortably far off, and therefore legendary. That is why I settled on a burglar, especially when I remember the existence of a side door. And here is our little Bilbo Baggins, the burglar, the chosen and selected burglar. So, let's get on and make some plans. Very well then, said Thorin, supposing the burglar expert gives us some ideas or suggestions. He turned with mock politeness to Bilbo. First I should like to know a bit more about things, he said, feeling all confused and a bit shaky inside, but so far still tookishly determined to go on with things. I mean, about the gold and the dragons and all that, and how it got there, or who it belongs to, and so on and so on. Bless me, said Thorin, haven't you got a map? And didn't you hear our song? And haven't we been thinking and talking and planning about this for hours? All the same, I should like it all plain and clear, said he, obstinately, putting on his business manner, usually reserved for people who try to borrow money off him, and doing his best to appear wise and prudent and professional and live up to Gandalf's reputation and recommendation. Also, I should like to know about the risks, out-of-pocket expenses, time required, remuneration, and so forth, by which he meant, what am I going to get out of it, and am I going to come back alive? Very well, then. Long ago, Thorin said, my great-grandfather Thror's time, our family was driven out of the far north and came back with all of their wealth and all their tools to this mountain on the map. It had been discovered by my far ancestor, Thrain the Old, but now they mined and tunnelled and made huger halls and greater workshops. In addition, I believe they found a good deal of gold and a great many jewels too. Anyway, they grew immensely rich and famous, and my grandfather was king under the mountain again, and treated with great reverence by the mortal men who lived to the south, and were gradually spreading up the running river, as far as the valley overshadowed by the mountain. They built the merry town of Dale there in those days. Kings used to send for our smiths and reward even the least faithful most richly. Fathers would beg us to take their sons as apprentices. They would pay us handsomely, especially in food supplies, which we never bothered to grow or find for ourselves. Altogether, those were good days for us, and the poorest of us had money to spend and to lend and leisure to make beautiful things just for the fun of it, not to speak of the most marvellous and magical toys, the likes of which is not to be found in the world nowadays. So my grandfather's halls became full of armour and jewels and carvings and cups, and the toy markets of Dale were the wonders of the north. Undoubtedly, this was what brought the dragon. Dragons are attracted to golds and jewels and the pretty things that we create. There were lots of dragons in the north in those days, and gold was probably getting scarce up there in the north, with the dwarfs flying south or getting killed and all the general waste and destruction the dragons make. Well, there was a most especially greedy, strong and wicked worm called Smaug. One day he flew up into the air and came south. The first we heard of it was a noise, like a hurricane coming from the north, and the pine trees on the mountain creaking and cracking in the wind. Some of the dwarfs happened to be outside. I was one, luckily. A fine adventurous lad in those days I was, always wondering about. Well, it saved my life that day. Well, from a good way off, we saw the dragon settle on our mountain in a spout of flame. Then he came down the slopes, and when he reached the woods, they all went up in a fire. By that time, all the bells were ringing in Dale, and the warriors were arming. The dwarfs rushed out of their great gate, but there was the dragon. He was waiting for them. None escaped that way. The river rushed up in steam, a fog fell on Dale, and the fog the dragon came on and destroyed most of the warriors. The usual unhappy story. It was all too common in those days. Then he went back and crept through the front gates and routed all the halls, the lanes, the tunnels, the alleys, the cellarways, the mansions, the passages. After that, there were no dwarfs left alive inside. All gone, all dead. And he took all the wealth for himself. Probably for that is the dragon's way. Anyway, he piled it up in great heaps far inside and slept on it for a bed, and there he has been ever since. Later, he used to crawl out sometimes, crept out at night and carry people away, especially maidens, to eat, until the town of Dale, the people's town, the human town, was all ruined and deserted. What goes on there, I don't know for certain, but I don't suppose anyone lives any nearer than the edge of the Long Lake. The few of us that were well outside sat and wept in hiding and cursed Smaug, and there we were unexpectedly joined by my father and grandfather, their beards singed off. They looked very grim but said very little. When I asked how they got out, they told me to hold my tongue, and said that one day in the proper time I should know. After that, we went away. We had to earn our living as best we could down in the other lands, often sinking as low as blacksmith work, or even coal mining. Imagine, kings mining for coal. But we have never forgotten our stolen treasure, nor forgotten our stolen kingdom. And we set aside a bit of money to try and get it back again. Well, it's been a long time now, and, well, there is that. I've often wondered about my father and grandfather's escape. Now I see they must have used that side door that Gandalf got a hold of the map for. I didn't get a hold of it. I was given it, said the wizard. Your grandfather, J.R.R, was killed, you remember, in the mines of Moria by Azog the goblin. Curse his name, yes, said Thorin. And Thrain, your father, went away on the 21st of April, 100 years ago last Thursday, and he's not been seen since. True, said Thorin. Well, your father gave this to me to give to you, and I've chosen my very own time for handing it to you. You can hardly blame me, considering the trouble I've had to find you. Your father could not remember his own name when he gave me the paper, and he never told me yours. So on the whole, I think I ought to be praised and thanked. Here it is, he said, handing the map to Thorin. I don't understand, said Thorin, and Bilbo felt he would have liked the same. The explanation did not seem to fit. Yes, your grandfather, said the wizard slowly and grimly. Well, your grandfather gave the map to his son for safety before he went to the mines of Moria. Your father went away to try his luck with the map after your grandfather was killed, and lots of adventures of a most unpleasant sort he had, but he never got near the mountain. How he got there, I don't know, but I found him prisoner in the dungeons of the necromancer. Whatever were you doing there? Asked Thorin with a shudder, and all the dwarfs shivered. Never you mind. I was finding things out as usual, and a nasty, dangerous business it is. Yes, even I, Gandalf, only just escaped. I tried to save your father, but it was too late. He was witless and wandering, and had almost forgotten everything except this map and that key. We have long ago paid the goblins of Moria, said Thorin. We must give thought to the necromancer. No, said Gandalf. He's an enemy far beyond the powers of all the dwarves put together, even if they could be put together. The one thing your father wished was for you to get this map and use this key. The dragon and the mountain are big enough tasks for you already. Hear, hear, said Bilbo, and accidentally said it aloud. Hear what? They said, turning suddenly towards him, and he was so flustered that he answered, Hear what I have to say. What's that? They asked. Well, okay, all right. I should say that you ought to go east and have a look around. After all, there is that side door, and dragons must be sleep. They must sleep sometimes, I suppose. If you sit on the doorstep long enough, I dare say you will think of something. And well, don't you know, I think we've talked long enough for one night, if you see what I mean. What about bed? And an early start and all that. I'll give you a good breakfast before you go. Before we go, I suppose you mean, said Thorin. Aren't you the burglar, and isn't sitting on the doorstep your job, not to speak of getting inside the door? But I'll take you up on your offer. Bed and breakfast. I like 6 eggs with my ham when starting out on a journey, fried, not poached, and mind you don't break them. After all the others had ordered their breakfasts without so much as a please, which annoyed Bilbo very much, they all got up. The Hobbit had to find room for them all, and filled all his spare rooms, and made beds and chairs and sofas before he got them all stowed, and went on to his little own bed, very tired, and not happy one bit. One thing he did make up his mind about was not to bother to get up very early and cook everybody else's wretched breakfast. This stage, the tookishness was wearing off, and he was now not so sure he wanted to go on any adventures in the morning. As he lay in bed, he heard Thorin, still humming to himself, in the bedroom next to him.
Far over the misty mountains cold,